Greetings everyone, welcome to Revenue Management. This is our introduction, and in this introduction we'll start with discussing some myths and facts of revenue management. We will also discuss two major RM strategies, define revenue management, and we'll just demonstrate the value of revenue management. So let's begin with a first myth or fact. True or false? All guests pay the same price. What do you think? Think everyone in that hotel is paying the same price for their room? Not quite. Okay, so this is a myth. Price discrimination does exist, and it's actually vital for good revenue management to offer different prices. Which leads us to our next myth or fact. Okay, so next myth or fact, determining optimal pricing or offering different prices is easy to do. Well, not quite. This is also a myth. Okay, and there's a lot of considerations we must address in order to effectively price optimally. And we'll discuss more on this throughout the course, of course. Next myth or fact, revenue management is concerned with top-line revenues and not expenses. So all we care about is selling rooms at a high rate. Is this true? Still a myth. So particularly now with the popularity of third-party sites, net revenue is very important rather than simply our total revenue. So we need to consider the expenses. Next myth or fact, revenue managers get report cards. That sounds strange. They're not students. But yes, this is actually a fact. Okay, so revenue managers get their STAR report, which measures the hotel's performance, but ultimately the value of the revenue manager's decisions. I'm sure you've seen something like this on your sim, perhaps. And finally, myth or fact, the goal of revenue management is to reach 100% occupancy. Is this true? Is this what you've been trying to do all this time? Not quite. Okay, so this is also a myth. The goal is to maximize revenue, okay, so which otherwise means obtain the best revenue per available room. And we'll discuss more on this in just one moment. So let's discuss now two major strategies for hotel revenue management. First one is, as you can see, we're driving our rate, okay? Which means basically we just want to set the highest rate for our hotel rooms. That's one way to make money, perhaps. The second is our heads and beds strategies. So we're not actually going to focus on having a high rate. We just want to fill up that hotel. Okay, so similar to that occupancy strategy where we just want to have 100% occupancy. Now let's take a look at these two strategies in regards to the calculations. So if we just looked at having the highest hotel rate, then that would be considered an ADR strategy in the sense that our average daily rate, okay, so this, in other words, the hotel rate that we're selling on average would be very high, okay? So you take the total rooms revenue divided by total rooms sold, okay? But remember, we're not actually looking at all of the total rooms. So we could sell one hotel room for $5 million, but we only sold one hotel room. And that doesn't consider what about the other hotel rooms. We could be, sitting at 1% occupancy. So we also have to consider the occupancy strategy, okay, or occupancy percent. So this is our heads and beds. So we actually want to think about, well, how many hotel rooms are we actually selling? Okay, so now we take our total rooms sold divided by the total rooms available. So now, in terms of maximizing revenue, neither one, okay, if we focus only on the total occupancy, again, we can sell out our hotel rooms, but we could be selling our rooms for $1, and that may not be beneficial. And if we thought about our previous example with ADR, if we only sold one hotel room, that probably wouldn't be beneficial either. So we have to take a look at our revenue per available room. Okay, and in a way, this considers both our ADR and our occupancy, and even shows that in our equation. Okay, so if we take our ADR and we multiply by the occupancy, the percent of rooms that are actually being sold, then we get our revenue per available room, and that's what's really important in regards to revenue management. So what is actually revenue management? Well, we have some definitions here, okay? But ultimately, we're setting prices, we're controlling our inventory in terms of our rooms. We're determining where we want to sell those rooms, what channels. Okay, so really offering rates and inventory controls that are most appropriate for the anticipated demand. That's a really great definition, because we also have to consider the amount of demand. We have to do a lot of forecasting. So it's not as simply as setting one hotel price. And I want to show you a little example here to represent the value of revenue management and how it actually maximizes revenue. So let's take a look here. So we have our demand curve, okay? And in this example, we'll be pricing a hotel room for $150. So what happens when we price our room for just $150 and we only have one price? Let's see how much money we make from our room sales. Okay, so of course we have our variable cost here, so we want to sell it more than $15. But let's see what happens. So we sold that room for $150. Okay, don't worry about all this coming up. We'll discuss in a moment. But just look at the purple area here. Okay, so if we sold our room for $150, we basically will figure out that we make about about $7,000 almost if we sold for $150. Okay, but let's take a look at what's happening here on the right side of that $150. Well, we had some customers who they paid $150. That's fine, but you know what? They were actually willing to pay more money for that room. So what does that mean? Well, we left some money on the table. It means we could have made more money. We could have sold those rooms for maybe $200. So that's something we have to consider. What also happens up here, okay, so this is passed up contribution. These are customers who, they're going to pay more than $15, which is fine, right? That's going to cover our variable costs. But they wouldn't have paid $150. Okay, so maybe these people, if we sold our room for $100, okay, so somewhere around here, we sold it for $100, we could have sold it to these customers, okay? And we still would have made more money, because as long as we surpass our variable costs, we would have made more money, because we're not actually selling out our entire hotel room, or hotel, sorry. So now let's take a look at, so remember this number, okay, $6,750, okay? So we'll leave that here so we remind ourselves, okay, so room sold at $150 is $6,750. That's our total profit. Now let's take a look at what happens in another example. Now we could, instead of only offering that one price at $150, in this case we're going to offer two different prices. Okay, so we're going to be able to capture more of that demand. So instead of that $150, we have one price at $100. Okay, so remember those guests that they didn't want to pay $150, but they would have paid $100. Well, we have that demand. We've captured that demand. But we also have the guests that, remember, they paid the $150, but they were actually interested or willing to pay more. They would have paid $200. So we've captured that demand. Okay, so what happens in summary is that, look at that total contribution. Okay, so we profit more, we maximize our revenue. We're now at $8,100 rather than the $6,700. So in other words, this is another example of the value of revenue management, why we offer different prices to different segments. Now this is a simplified version, and of course we're going to offer multiple prices in multiple segments, and there's going to be a lot of variables, but this should help you understand the value of revenue management. This has been the introduction to revenue management. Thanks for watching, and happy revenue managing.